Not every prison has iron bars. Today, you'll meet Eleanor Bennett, a 69-year-old needlepointer who spent months locked in a stuffy bedroom while her millionaire husband basked in the applause of the Hamptons elite. Between the scent of mildew and the fragrance of honeysuckle, she stitched not only tablecloths, but her own escape, stitch by stitch, until she shook his empire. So get ready. This true story will grip you until the last courageous breath. If you've already felt the first chill, like, subscribe, and tell us what city you're watching from. Come closer, because stories like this deserve to be heard with an open heart. We're ready to listen, Eleanor. Please make yourself comfortable.
My dears, come a little closer. No need for ceremony. This old woman of 69 can still see well enough to recognize curiosity in your eyes. You know there are stories that need to be told, even when the voice trembles and the hands no longer have the steadiness they once did. I, Eleanor, have much to share. It's not an easy story to hear, nor was it easy to live. It's about invisible walls, about a marriage that was more of a prison, about a man who called me the Bennett family jewel while keeping me in a glass cage. But it's also about how, even in my late 60s, I discovered that it's never too late to stitch your own freedom. Do you have a moment to listen? Then settle in, and I'll put on a pot of coffee to warm up this conversation. I was born in Asheville, North Carolina, in a simple house where the floors were swept 3 times a day, and the tablecloths were always hand-stitched. My mother, Clara, was known for the crochet she sold to supplement the income my father brought in from the lumberyard. I grew up among yarn and needles, learning each stitch as if memorizing a prayer. Our backyard had a dogwood tree, and I used to sit under it on summer afternoons, practicing cross-stitch while the blossoms fell around me. There were 5 children, me the only girl. My brothers could dream of college, travel, adventures. Me? Well, it was my lot to be accomplished, as my father said with a smile that mixed pride and limitation. Eleanor, a girl who stitches well, never goes without, he would repeat, without realizing that he was planting in me not only a love for the art, but also the seed of dependency. In my early 20s, I was already recognized in the area. My tablecloth circulated in the homes of the wealthiest families. It was during one of these deliveries that I met Richard Bennett. He had just inherited his father's construction company and displayed the pride of someone who thinks himself destined for success. Tall, with that kind of intimidating good looks, he entered the client's living room as I explained how to care for the embroidery. Such meticulous work, he commented, picking up the piece between his fingers as if evaluating merchandise. Who even does this anymore? That anymore weighed like a stone in my stomach, but I smiled because that's what was expected of me. 3 months later, we were engaged. My family was ecstatic. A Bennett, a construction company on the rise. My father repeated that I had caught a marlin with sewing thread. No one asked if that's what I wanted. The wedding took place at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. I remember the weight of the dress, the hand-sewn pearls, the bouquet of white roses, and I remember, above all, the feeling of being transferred from one house to another, like an antique piece of furniture that has value but no voice. Our apartment on 5th Avenue was immense and cold. Richard made a point of showing friends the panoramic view, the imported marble, the expensive paintings. I was just another item in that sophisticated decor, the elegant wife who smiled in photos and lowered her head at meetings. Eleanor, a Bennett woman doesn't work with her hands, he decreed when he caught me stitching a placemat. That's something. Well, you understand. I understood perfectly. My stitching was shameful to him, reminding him of my modest origins. For years, I kept my needles and yarn a secret, working hidden in the back room when he traveled. It was my small, silent rebellion, my little corner of identity in a world where I was just an accessory. Years passed. Richard grew in construction, became the titan of tri-state construction, as the local press said. The higher he climbed, the more I faded. My body, once healthy, was subjected to strict diets. Dietary discipline keeps your body worthy of the Bennett name, he said. I counted kidney beans on my plate while watching my husband devour juicy steaks. I was becoming a ghost in my own home. The cleaning ladies looked at me with pity. The garden, with its fragrant honeysuckle, became my refuge during sleepless nights. And the stuffy little room where I kept my yarn became the only space where I still still felt like Eleanor, not just Mrs. Thompson. It was in that little room, at 69, that I decided my life couldn't end like this, that there was more to me than a borrowed name and a disciplined body. It was there that I realized, even with my fingers not as nimble as they used to be, I could still knit my own story. And it all started when that coded key fob jingled in. The lock, the day of the construction company's corporate anniversary party, arrived with the weight of an obligation. Richard had ordered a designer red dress, 3 sizes smaller than my usual. Lost enough weight, he asked, more stating than questioning, as he adjusted his gold watch on his wrist. I dressed as if putting on armor, knowing I'd be displayed as a trophy before partners and investors. The zipper barely closed in the back, leaving red marks on my skin. I took a deep breath, or tried to, in the tightness of that fabric. Eleanor, smile more. No one likes a wife with a funeral face, he muttered through his teeth while patting the mayor on the back in greeting. It was during this party, between glasses of champagne I couldn't drink, alcohol makes you fat, darling, and canapes I couldn't eat, that I noticed something different. Richard was showing off the new security system installed at home to his personal trainer. 12 digits, biometric, alarm connected to the police, he boasted. Swiss bank security, my eyes captured. The sequence of numbers his fingers carelessly typed on his phone, demonstrating the app. A code that opened not only the doors of the house, but also the safe in the study. The same one where he kept documents, family heirlooms, and I suspected secrets. That night I went home early, claiming a migraine. My designated driver, Joe, a discreet gentleman who had worked for Richard for decades, left me at the door with a look of understanding. Maybe he knew more about my life than I imagined. The empty house held an oppressive silence. I walked up the stairs slowly, stopping. In front of Richard's study, the safe was behind the Monet print. An irony, since the painting depicted water lilies, a subject far removed from my husband's world. My hands trembled as I typed the memorized code. 12 numbers that represented my small act of rebellion. The soft click of the safe door opening sounded like thunder in my ears. Inside, I found what I expected. Documents, property deeds, some antique jewelry. But it was a small blue device that caught my attention. The bank's token, that electronic key that generated passwords to access the accounts. Next to it, a folder with bank statements showed numbers that made me gasp. Millions, and my name appeared on documents I had never signed. It was there, at that moment, that I realized I wasn't just a trophy wife. I was a useful signature, a borrowed name for transactions I didn't even know about, an involuntary accomplice. I carefully put everything back as I found it, closed the safe, and returned to my room. Lying in the king-size bed I shared with a man who had barely touched me in years, I made a silent promise. January would be the turning point of my life. I spent the following week observing Richard's habits, the routines of the house, the moments when I was alone. I began to notice small opportunities that had previously gone unnoticed. Our neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, who sold cookies at the church bake sale, the back room, where my yarn and needles awaited patiently, the old cell phone forgotten in the kitchen drawer. I opened the dresser drawer and took out the old cell phone, turning it over in my hands as if it were a fragile relic Mrs. Higgins had taught me how to use. It secretly, during our quick chats at the church gate. You need to connect with the world, Eleanor, she said with that frank way of hers. The first month of the year brought with it the weight of unspoken resolutions. While Richard celebrated new contracts with the city, I cross-stitched in the silence of the little room the phrase, "No one is born an ornament," words that hammered in my mind every time he paraded me at events as his greatest asset. "We need extra yarn for your new crest, Richard," I asked one afternoon, serving him coffee exactly as he liked it, strong, black, with 2 shortbread cookies on the side. "I want to embroider something special in gratitude for all you provide me." He smiled, satisfied with my apparent submission. Eleanor's finally understanding her role, he commented to no one in particular before authorizing the purchase. What he didn't know was that for every point awarded on that darn scorecard, which crept along at a snail's pace, I was churning out 3 pieces to sell. Table runners, napkins, centerpieces that Betty discreetly took to the farmer's market. My secret smelled of fresh thread and tasted of sweet revenge. The nights were tougher. Richard slept clutching the Fitbit that tracked my daily steps to make sure you're staying healthy, honey, while I feigned peaceful slumber. Under the covers, my fingers ached from the hidden work, and my mind raced with half-formed plans. The bedroom, decorated in neutral tones, chosen by some fancy interior designer, suffocated me like a velvet-lined jewelry box. On Thursday mornings, when he was off off golfing with politicians and CEOs, I allowed myself a little breathing room. I'd sit on the porch for half an hour, watching life on the streets of Seattle. People rushing to work, college kids with backpacks, construction workers carrying lunch pails. A vibrant world so close and yet so far from my gilded cage. February rolled in with heavy rain and new restrictions. Richard installed extra security, cameras in the hallways, claiming he was worried about reported break-ins in the building. My little burner phone, hidden in a vintage radio in the sunroom, became my only connection to the outside world. It was on a damp, dark night that I stumbled upon the Golden Girls Craft Club online, women over 60 reinventing themselves through arts and crafts. I created an anonymous profile and posted pictures of my creations. The next day, there were 5 rave reviews and a question. Do you sell these? The first official order arrived a week later. $50 for a set of placemats. Money that meant more than its face value. It was the first income I'd earned since my wedding 40 years ago. You shouldn't have to do this, Mrs. Davis, said Tony, the driver, when he caught me stashing away yarn I'd bought discreetly during a doctor's appointment. It's just a hobby, Tony, I replied, my heart pounding. His tired eyes revealed that he didn't believe me, but he nodded respectfully. If you need anything, Mrs. Davis, he trailed off, creating a silent pact between us. At the board meetings that took place in our dining room, I poured coffee and smiled politely while the men discussed astronomical figures and grand projects. The construction company has never been stronger, they said, raising glasses in a toast to Richard's success. And I thought of the irony. While he was building towering skyscrapers across the city, my husband didn't notice that the walls of our marriage were beginning to show discreet but irreversible cracks. My fingers counted the bills furtively. $280. I hid the money in an old tin of English tea biscuits that Richard would never touch. That's for the help, he'd say. Each bill represented a small victory, a step toward an independence I hadn't thought possible. At 69, our sales grew slowly but surely. The Golden Girls Craft Club had become my digital refuge, where other women shared not only crafting techniques, but also stories of late-life reinventions. Linda from Miami had opened a bakery at 70. Marlene from Chicago sold watercolor paintings after half a century. As a housewife, their words of encouragement lit a flame in me that I thought had been extinguished. Mrs. Davis, there's someone who wants to meet you, Betty said one afternoon in March, discreetly handing me the money from another sale. My nephew, Kevin, he's a law student. He saw your embroidery and was really impressed. Betty, you know, I can't meet anyone without Richard's approval, I replied, fearful. She smiled with the wisdom of someone who had seen a lot of life pass by. He'll be at church on Sunday. He can sit in the pew behind you. St. Patrick's Day painted Seattle green that March, but my private celebration took place in a discreet pew at St. James Cathedral. Kevin, a skinny young man with round glasses, whispered during the Our Father, Mrs. Davis, I've been reading about marketing contracts that exploit the images of business executives' wives. Do you sign any documents for the construction company? That simple question opened a door I didn't know existed. No, I didn't sign documents. Richard used a general power of attorney that I signed early in our marriage, when I still believed he would take care of me. I see in the newspaper that you're an ambassador for the construction company's charitable campaigns. Do you get paid for that? Again, no. My image appeared in advertisements for donations, park openings, food drives, events where I smiled mechanically, wearing clothes chosen by Richard, repeating rehearsed phrases. That could be considered image exploitation, Mrs. Davis. We'd need evidence. Words of Kevin echoed in my mind for days. Proof? The safe, the documents, the blue key fob that gleamed like a small promise. A week later, Robert traveled to Washington, D.C. for a meeting with senators. I seized the opportunity to invite my physical therapist, Denise, over for tea. She, who treated my aching hands without questioning the calluses on my fingertips, became my unwitting accomplice. Could you showcase these table runners as the work of an anonymous student? I asked, handing her a carefully wrapped package. At Pike Place Market, perhaps? Denise, with her kind eyes, nodded without questioning. 2 days later, she returned, beaming. They sold out in half an hour. People were whistling in admiration. They want more! That distant whistle of admiration sounded like a marching band celebrating freedom. Applause I hadn't received in decades. A recognition of my talent, not my name or appearance. Something within me, withered by years of neglect, began to bloom timidly. With the money from the sales, I bought a used cell phone from Judy, more modern than the last. I carefully hid it in the retro boombox in the spare room, where I spent hours photographing my embroidery embroidery and posting it on the Golden Years Facebook group. Orders arrived daily. Doilies, placemats, table runners, napkins with personalized monograms. April brought 10 orders a week, and my hands couldn't keep up alone. I needed help, but who could I trust without arousing suspicion? Kevin suggested a risky idea during our brief encounter at Sunday service. Mrs. Abigail, we could form a small co-op. I know some discreet ladies from the Lower East Side who embroider beautifully. How would I explain the money, Kevin? Robert controls every penny that comes in and goes out of our accounts. The young paralegal handed me a bank card. Digital account in your social security number. He won't receive any physical statements. That small rectangle of plastic burned in my hands like hot coal. Freedom and danger in equal measure. Meanwhile, Kevin was doing his own investigating, feigning interest in sponsorship for an academic event. He visited the construction company's headquarters. During a conversation with the marketing director, he noticed social responsibility reports where my face was prominently featured. They're using your image to humanize the company, Mrs. Abigail. Sales have increased 30% since they started associating the construction company with charitable causes. Starring you. The revelation didn't surprise me, but Kevin brought something more disturbing. I found inflated donation reports. It's not illegal, but ethically dubious. We need to access those documents in the safe. One night, as the rain lashed against the windows of the apartment, Robert returned early from a business dinner. His heavy footsteps in the hallway alerted me. I barely had time to hide the cell phone among the fabrics. "What are you doing in this little room?" he questioned, throwing the door open without knocking. "I'm embroidering your crest, dear," I replied, feeling cold sweat trickle down my back. His eyes scanned the room, pausing momentarily on the boombox. My heart stopped for a moment. "I'm suspicious, Abigail. The maids are saying you spend hours in here." The next day, technicians installed cameras in the spare room. Robert smiled as he explained, "For your safety, dear. You alone. Embroidering with sharp objects. A fall could be fatal at your age." It wasn't concern. It was surveillance. My prison was getting new digital locks. Did those cameras mean the end of my small business? No. I turned surveillance into evidence. As I sewed, I emphasized the sound of the thread breaking. A sharp snap that recorded sounded like a whip and described aloud to my imaginary friends the emptiness of the refrigerator and the pain in my swollen hands. "Abigail is getting senile," Robert commented to the family doctor, who nodded without properly examining me. If my sanity was questioned, I needed a bolder plan. With Kevin, we studied the legal possibility of claiming my image rights. He discovered a loophole. If we proved that Mr. Robert exploited your image without explicit consent in lucrative campaigns, you could claim a share of the profits. I needed to access the safe again, but the cameras made any suspicious movement impossible. Robert now monitored everything on his cell phone, proud of his smart home. My blood pressure rose, my fingers were constantly tingling, and I slept less and less. One night in June, during the annual block party, Robert traveled to Miami to celebrate with new investors. I was left alone with the housekeeper, Mrs. Celeste, a discreet woman who had worked with us for decades. I devised a risky plan. "Honey, I don't feel so good," I mumbled during dinner, letting my fork clatter to the plate for effect. My hand was shaking, and it wasn't just acting. Genuine fear was making my body react. "Mrs. Eleanor," exclaimed Martha, rushing to support me as I slid from the chair. "Call 911, I whispered. "Don't tell Mr. Thompson yet. He's in an important meeting." The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes. The paramedics took my blood pressure, 180 over 120. No need to fake the distress. At the hospital, away from the cameras and Thompson's control, I revealed a bit of the truth to the geriatrician. "Doctor, I live under constant stress. My husband controls my diet, my movements, my clothes." The doctor observed me with professional attention, her notes filling out an official form. "How long has it been since you've eaten properly?" "Years." He says dietary discipline keeps my body worthy of the Thompson name. After some tests, the geriatrician recorded suspected chronic emotional abuse and discreetly handed me a card for the public defender's office specializing in elder rights. "You're not alone, Mrs. Eleanor." Thompson rushed back from New York City, furious about the unnecessary exposure. At the hospital, he played the part of the concerned husband, promising the doctors that I would have the best care at home. On the way back, his silence weighed heavier than any shouting. Only when we parked in the garage did he break the silence. "Don't ever do that again, Eleanor. Health problems are treated with our private physician." "Understood." I nodded, feigning submission. But something had changed inside me. The official medical document would be crucial for the lawsuit that Kevin was was preparing in secret. The next morning, Thompson announced to the local news that he would donate 500 Thanksgiving baskets in my name, a gesture of gratitude for the scare my beloved wife gave us. TV cameras captured his benevolent smile as I stood in the background, pale and silent. That blatant exploitation of my fragility was the last straw. Using the hidden cell phone, I recorded a short video with my face out of focus but my voice perfectly audible. The basket I carry is one of courage, not silence. I sent the video to Kevin, who posted it on an anonymous profile. Within hours, hundreds of women shared it, recognizing themselves in that simple sentence. Comments like, "I carry that basket too," and "My basket has been full for 30 years, flooded the post. The video reached the Women's Committee of the Senior Entrepreneurs Chamber, which was investigating cases of elderly women being silenced in the business world. The president, Dr. Miller, contacted Kevin. Dr. Miller suggested a bold strategy, a private hearing with the committee to tell my side of the story. I needed definitive proof before that meeting. The opportunity arose when Thompson traveled to Los Angeles to receive an entrepreneurship award. The safe, the 12-digit code. My heart pounded like a drum as I carefully typed each number in the correct sequence. The soft click of the opening sounded like liberation. I grabbed the blue thumb drive and photographed all the documents I found. Reports containing my supposed signatures authorizing the use of my image, suspicious bank transfers, inflated donation declarations. These evidences showed systematic moral manipulation. The internal audit of the construction company, fearing reputational scandal after receiving the anonymous complaint sent by Kevin, temporarily blocked Thompson's corporate cards for investigation. That measure infuriated him like never before. Blind with rage, he tried to have me committed to a private clinic the same day, claiming severe emotional imbalance that compromised the family business. The ambulance was already waiting at the gate when Aunt Betty, now a popular pie blogger with thousands of followers, broadcast live on her social media. "Folks, I'm here baking my apple pie while a sad story unfolds nearby. A talented lady, known for her prize-winning quilts, is being taken against her will to a clinic by her businessman husband." The broadcast went viral. Viewers who identified with the situation pressured the clinic through massive comments. The director, embarrassed, refused the involuntary commitment without an independent psychiatric evaluation. Thompson returned furious but found reporters at the front of the building. His public image was at stake. He needed to retreat strategically. "It was all a misunderstanding," he declared, his smile tense. "My wife deserves the best care at home." September marked the official launch of the quilting collective we'd been quietly planning. Threads of Time brought together 12 women from the Mill District, many of them widows of former construction workers. Jake turned down a generous job offer that Ron made through intermediaries, a clumsy attempt to get him away from me. Success took its toll. My swollen hands demanded daily physical therapy, and society columnists, friends of Ron, published nasty comments calling my creations sentimental crafts from a confused old lady. Even so, I kept going. I sacrificed sleep to fulfill Christmas orders that were already rolling in. Each quilt square represented a point of freedom, each sale a small victory against decades of being silenced. The Sunday magazine of the state's biggest newspaper was interested in interviewing me, initially as the devoted wife of a businessman. When their reporter, Mary, arrived for the preliminary chat, Ron was in a meeting. On the back porch, I revealed a part of my story and showed her my quilts. "This isn't the story they sent me to cover," she confessed, her eyes gleaming with journalistic interest. "But it's the story that deserves to be told." We agreed on a strategy. She would propose a profile to the editors about a renaissance of talent in older age, focusing on local crafts. Mary kept her word. The Sunday magazine wanted to photograph me wearing couture in luxurious settings, the traditional image of the businessman's wife. I refused outright. Photograph me as I am, with my paint-stained apron, my hands worn by time, in the old warehouse. In the lower ninth that we've turned into a studio school. The editor hesitated, but decided to do a poll on social media about which version the public preferred. The response was overwhelming. Authenticity won by 89%. Ron tried to intervene, offering generous sponsorship to the newspaper if they adapted the piece. "Too late," Mary informed me by text. "The cover is already approved. Audrey beyond the Dalton name, the art of rebirth at 69. The article smashed sales records. Phone calls poured in from all over the country. Morning shows wanted interviews. Publishers suggested books about my quilting technique. Ron, sensing the inevitable shift shift in winds, tried one last card. We can turn this into a family business, Audrey. Imagine an exclusive line of home decor with your signature, backed by Dalton Construction. I stared at him in silence. After 4 decades, it was the first time he had recognized the value in my work, not for merit, but for opportunism. No, Ron, this business already has an owner. November arrived with a ceremony at the Kennedy Center, the senior entrepreneurship event brought together businesses started by people over 60. I was invited as the keynote speaker. In the front row, I saw Jake Sue and the quilters from the collective. In the back rows, discreet and visibly uncomfortable, Ron Dart. I went on stage holding the bank token that I had permanently removed from the safe deposit box, now hanging from a silk ribbon around my neck. That small blue device, a symbol of the control he had exerted, had become an emblem of my liberation. Tools of control can also become keys to freedom, I declared to the auditorium, perfumed by the brewed coffee and donuts that our members served at the entrance. I learned late in life that our value is not in the last name we carry, but in the threads we weave with our own hands. The audience rose in applause. From my privileged place on the stage, I saw Ron tapping his watch, as if trying to hold on to time that had slipped away. When our eyes met, there was no hatred in my eyes, only the serene conviction of someone who had finally found her place in the world. Today, at 70, I live in a simple apartment in Georgetown. My collective employs 25 women, many with stories of silencing similar to mine. The divorce was resolved with a court settlement that recognized my rights over a portion of the fortune built during our marriage, money that we invested in expanding the studio school. Ron and I rarely meet. When it happens, at business events that we can't avoid, we exchange cordial nods. Bitterness has transformed into mutual understanding. We were products of a generation and of values that are thankfully crumbling. I still tremble when I lock the apartment door at night, old habits from someone who lived in fear. But when the smell of new yarn mixes with the aroma of cookies baking for visitors, I take a deep breath and give thanks. Each stitch embroidered, each sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the joint pain, the fear of failing in public, was worth the price to win myself back. My needlework now tells the stories of women like me, stories that, like colorful threads, weave together pain and beauty, fragility and strength. And that, my dears, is the real legacy I've built.